Ahoy! One of the most common requests for new guide videos I'm getting is people asking where and what to farm in order to get loot to sell and develop their characters. And the main reason I've been avoiding this topic is because it is something very specific, and it is also something that normally gets outdated almost immediately. See, every new update adds new content to the game. Every few weeks we get new events, and every year another filthy cheater ruins the game's market by releasing a software that farms dungeons for people. And last but not least, there's also the factor that I can safely say a lot of people watch these kinds of videos. So if, for example, I prove that Ruina Station is the most profitable dungeon, everyone's going to flood that and make it the least profitable simply because they create an overflow of the loot that people would normally farm there. So considering all of these factors, I can guarantee that this video is not going to tell you what to farm, it's not going to make you rich, and that you are still going to need a bunch of luck and hard work if you want to get far. But what this video is going to show you is what kind of methods really exist that people use to farm, and might give you a guideline on which is best for you, and give you some general tips on when and what might be a good idea for you to focus on when farming. A word of warning though, a long and boring video is ahead of you with a lot of talking and little action other than some illustrations. Well, it's more of an article really, but I don't have anywhere to post it, and for some reason that I don't understand, people seem to prefer watching videos instead of reading articles. Now, one more thing before we begin. This isn't like a scientific research on how things work. It is only my insight, and I'm speaking about all of this from experience only. I am fairly certain there are more effective ways that I don't know of, as I've been playing for over 5 years actively now, and all in all I consider myself to have supernaturally bad luck compared to most other players I'm surrounded with. But I have made it quite far in the game, and these are the stuff I followed without spending a single penny of real money on this game. Of course, all these super successful people are more than welcome to share their ideas in the comments. Alright then, I've wasted enough of your time, so let's begin. Now I mentioned the farming methods, so let's start with that. Let's call the first one casual farming. This method is for people who really are just opening up the game to spend an hour of free time every once in a while and don't actually really have any future plans with it. Just open up the dungeons list in the menu, use your mouse scroll and select anything that you're in the mood for. Just don't do something too hard, always have some friends or guildmates to chat with, and enjoy stress-free gaming. This method won't really get you anywhere far in the game, but it's a really fun way to pass time when you have nothing better to do or don't feel like concentrating much. But of course there's always the small chance to get lucky with some valuable loot like extenders or bikes. The second one that I would actually categorize as farming I'm going to refer to as focused farming. This is for more dedicated players who enjoy setting up some achievements for themselves and completing goals and stuff. The way the loot system in Cabal's dungeons works is every regular dungeon's chests or bosses can drop weapons and armor pieces, upgrade and force cores, and the occasional rare stuff like epaulets, extenders and bikes. But almost every dungeon has some type of loot that is specific to that one dungeon and cannot be obtained anywhere else. When you click the entrance of a dungeon, there's a tab where most of the notable loot is listed. Usually at the end of that list you can find something unique to that dungeon. For example, a vacant Hazardous Valley is the only place where Orphidia's amulet is lootable. But you have Altar of Siena with bracelets, Tower of the Dead and Forgotten Temples with rings, and most of the harder dungeons with advanced runes. So for example, a good strategy for players interested in this method is to select, let's say, Pandemonium and farm it for the jewel dropped by the last boss. And the good thing is there's still the chance to find valuable stuff like extenders. And something else that also fits into this category, but you probably didn't think of it by my description, so it deserves a highlight. Farming those dungeons that drop the kind of craft materials that form a set. By that I mean the elemental stones needed for epic boosters from Awakened DX dungeons, the elemental orbs needed for rune slot extenders from Elite DX dungeons, the orbs for talismans in Elite Maquinas Outpost and Elite Tower of the Dead, and the elemental crystals needed for ultimate grade epic boosters in Ultimate DX dungeons. Well, of course, if you're strong enough for Ultimate DX or Elite Tower of the Dead, then you wouldn't be watching this video. Anyway, let's move on. And the third method is something I'd call grinding. Currently, there are two dungeons, Eternal Chaos Arena and Glacius Inferno, where every regular monster and every chest drops fragments for Divine Stones or Chaos Cores. These are pretty much guaranteed and are affected by drop rate boost from premium services, blessing beads and events. Well, by guaranteed, I mean you get more or less the same amount of fragments from each run, so you're guaranteed a certain amount of income from every run without having to rely on luck. But that's the downside too, there's no chance for anything more valuable either. This method is ideal for people who enjoy listening to music or watching movies while doing the repetitive task of farming the same thing over and over again. Unfortunately, the filthy cheaters I mentioned at the beginning of the video also enjoy this farming method with illegal third-party software, and most unfortunately they aren't getting banned for doing this. And they are absolutely ruining the market for legal players who don't abuse such things. So keep reporting those unfair players and maybe one day we'll be rid of them. So anyway, those three methods, casual farming, focused farming and grinding, are the methods I see existing in a game. But I still owe you a few tips for staying so long, and if you haven't fallen asleep yet and haven't closed the video, it's time to share them. My first piece of advice to you is to minimize your dungeon entry costs. That is, only run dungeons whose entries are cheap and are covered by your income, even if you just find a few upgrade cores. And make use of the free entries that are mailed for completing certain dungeons. If you open up the entrance window of any dungeon, you will see a section with the mailed rewards. Also keep in mind that in case of some dungeons you can actually complete up to 3 runs a day using only the free entries you get from mails, essentially eliminating the cost of entries entirely. Unfortunately, this only applies to the lower grade dungeons, but still there are plenty of those, so you can occupy yourself for hours just finishing those. The second piece of advice is this: don't underestimate the price of small stuff. Over time they add up and you'll be surprised how much money there is in those small things that some people simply throw away. I'm talking about stuff like craft materials from extracting items, option scrolls, or even looting alls from the ground. For example, I'm usually keeping force core pieces and upgrade core pieces to use them for crafting, and the common scrolls like critical damage or attack, and just dumping them into the agent shop whenever I've got nothing else more valuable to put there. And regarding the alls loot, well, personally I also learned and maxed these 3 runes simply because in the future I'm going to be needing those rune slots for more advanced stuff that I can't afford at the moment. But if I'd have to expand the slots later, why not use them for something smaller in the meantime? Over a few weeks the price of the runes and all the materials needed to max them was already paid, and anything above that is pretty much mine to keep. It's a really small thing, I agree, but over the long run it's useful. Also, when running dungeons that drop Palladium equipment, sometimes it's not really worth extracting them because the Astra cores are almost worthless. But if you have some inventory space to keep those items until you're finished with the dungeon, the NPCs actually pay a decent amount for them. Over 100,000 for one piece of armor, so if you sell about 3 or 4 of them, that's already the price of an upgrade core. Anyway, let's move on to something that's a lot bigger. Events and updates. Every year we get a couple of updates with new content added to the game, and there's almost always at least one event going on, and most of them are indeed aimed at rich and high-end players. But that doesn't automatically mean you can't benefit from them if you aren't rich or high-end. Many of those rich and high-end players aren't patient enough to farm everything for themselves, and during these events or right after updates there are several farmable items that they'll just buy for higher price than usual. A few examples: the previous update added Chaos upgrade to bracelets and new wing levels. Now, what do people need for Chaos upgrades on jewelries and wing levels? Chaos cores, that shiny jewel thing from Pandemonium, circuit jewels from extracted accessories, and Force Essence crafted from Force cores. All of those items were in pretty high demand in the first couple of weeks after the update, so if you had done some research on what was going to be added with the update, you could do some preparing beforehand. Another example about events. Let's say we get a collect and exchange type of event. You don't necessarily need to collect all the items and open the exchange loot box for yourself. Fortunately, you can sell the event items to other players who are more into gambling and still get a bunch of extra money for running the same dungeons you'd normally do every day. A while ago, I made a video about the best collect and exchange event item farming spots, to which you can find a link in the description. And if there's a drop rate boost event, of course you can just hit Eternal Chaos Arena or Glacius Inferna to farm a bunch of fragments and possibly keep them for a few weeks until their prices rise again before you sell them. And one last thing to mention, the matter of the difficulty of the chosen dungeons and the use of buff potions and elixirs. A lot of players want to finish some dungeons that are out of their league, and to make up for the missing gear they use potions. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that, after all that is part of the reason those potions exist. It is fine as long as you finish a run to see what that dungeon is like, or to complete an achievement, or to prove to your friend that you're so awesome. But it is not fine to continue farming it. In the end, you're going to waste a whole bunch of those potions, and anyway, the runs likely take too long to finish to farm effectively. Instead, what I recommend is to keep those potions for when you're farming dungeons that you can already finish without too much effort. Using them can dramatically increase your speed with clearing those dungeons. And if nothing else, you have a timer at the edge of your screen which motivates you not to waste any time. Some of the less profitable events, typically hunting events, usually award players with those potions, so it's a good idea to stack up on them for later use. So I hope this information proves to be helpful, especially for new players, and all the veterans are more than welcome to share their thoughts on this subject using the comments. Ahoy!